So here's another tank that I want to show off. It is actually a in a 40 gallon breeder tank, and you can see there's a lot of big fish in there right now. And like most folks during COVID, it's been very hard to either trade or donate fish to a lot of people in my community. So, because there's no meetings and stuff like that, but you can see in here there's a variety of fish. It normally would not be this stocked. It actually previously only had a few of the older cichlids that I have, but you can see here is very clearly a cichlid tank. Although you can see in the middle is a very big gourami. I've had gouramis very since the beginning of when I started fish keeping. This gourami is actually a very aggressive gourami that I've had. Does very well in a tank even with cichlids. But you can see the largest cichlid in this tank. It's very colorful with the red tail. That's actually Honduran Red Point. It's not a convict cichlids, although you can see in the tank there are other cichlids that look like convict cichlids, but these are actually all from one breeding line that I've had of Honduran Red Points. And part of when you're breeding fish, you can really try to get the qualities that you want out of it. And for most people, it's the color that a Honduran Red Point has compared to a convict cichlid, which may have some red or blue, but in a Honduran Red Point, which are genetically similar to convict cichlids, but their colors are much more pronounced. And prior to shutdown, I actually had been breeding, selectively breeding these Honduran Red Points, so I could really get a lot of color to the point where their kind of black and white color really doesn't even show up, that you primarily have a rainbow color. And I actually have some of those kind of selectively bred Honduran Red Points in my giant tank with the Oscar, if you remember my previous video. In this tank, I have that particular male that you can see is bullying everybody, who really gets his pick of the females. All the other cichlids you see that look like convict cichlids but are Honduran Red Points, they're all females. So this guy has virtually mated with every one of these females, and over time have produced a lot of fry, but because they're in this kind of very large community tank, a lot of them survive. But when I was selectively breeding them, I had put a couple into this male with another female into their own tank. They'll have probably at least 100 fry. And I ended up selling a lot of them and donating a lot of them to my local community for people who may be looking for a more colorful cichlid. But as you can see, the problem with even these Honduran Red Points, like convict cichlids, they are extremely aggressive and territorial. So it's not great if you have other fish that may not be able to survive the bullying. But as I told you, I had that gourami that's pretty big size, but still very resilient. You can see that their this gourami's fins and are just fine. Another cichlid that you can see, and I'll kind of zoom in for you, is you can see that there are these kind of other cichlids that are kind of pinkish in color. They're actually called daffodil brichardi cichlids. It is an African cichlid. They have these kind of very wispy fins and tails. They are actually harder to keep around because they do need very stable water conditions and also higher pH. So you need more alkaline, more dissolved minerals in the water for them. And if you actually don't acclimate them well when you change tanks, they can die pretty easily from the shock of going to an even more neutral pH. But if you have them in a a higher pH tank, they'll do just fine, and they are also like convict cichlids, very easy to breed once you get them acclimated in their environment. They are, of course, very aggressive when they breed. I actually got this original batch from the owner of a local fish store in my community, and he bred them, and he would sell them, and it's a great racket because when I bought them, I probably spent probably like 20 something dollars on them. But then I kind of ended up getting like hundreds over, this 2 year period of fry. But like I said, they're harder to acclimate into a new tank. So to give them to another person or to sell them to another person, you have to really make sure that they have their tank already set up, that's established, that has the higher pH. Otherwise, they will not survive that transition. But in terms of these daffodil brichardi, they are like some other African cichlids. Basically, when the parents kind of have multiple generations of fry, as they grow up, the older generations will take care of the younger generations. So they, for the most part, will look out for each other. The only time where there's aggression amongst the same kind of family is if they become sexually mature and they start looking to breed on their own. So whether it's a female or a male that's now trying to compete with mom or dad, that's when you'll start to see, potential fish deaths because they're fighting for the right to breed. So, but otherwise, in this particular tank, I have a lot of these daffodil brichardi, including probably like a seventh generation of fry now, based on how long I've had this grouping. Just so to zoom out, I also want to show you you can see on the kind of middle to right hand side, there are also these other African cichlids. You know, there are a lot of different type, and I'll probably go more into detail in a future video. But as long as you're really mixing African cichlids of a similar pH that they can survive the environment, and you can see I have aragonite uh, sand in my tank, that they do fairly well, and I do check the pH often. It is actually very high dissolved minerals and high pH, so they do fairly well. And even for the Honduran cichlids that usually can do well in neutral pH, they do just fine in here. So but as you can see, it's a pretty well stocked tank, or probably say overstocked tank, that I'm hoping when COVID's over, whenever that is that I'm able to donate them to other people who are interested. And because cichlids in general are diggers, they will pretty much dig up any type of plants. In this particular tank, I don't actually have a dirted medium in which I plant the any type of plants in. I actually just put them in these little mini jars filled up with the same substrate from the tank. So if I do end up having any fish, particularly the Honduran Red Points, dig up The plants, I can just kind of put it back in. But otherwise, it's something. It's one of my bigger tanks. A lot of active fish. And just for folks who are new to this, if you have a lot of aggressive fish, what you generally want to do is probably feed more often, because fish get more aggressive when they're hungry. And when they're hungry, they're going to attack out their tank mates, or try to get to that food a lot faster than others. So you don't want to end up having certain fish compete over food and then not getting to eat. So, you may have to end up doing a lot more cleaning, gravel vacuuming, which I do fairly often with this tank, because it has so many, it's so overstocked right now that, feeding a little bit more each day is okay. And also, in case you're wondering, although there's a heater in there this year, my experimentation is to actually not use a heater, because my home does keep actually over 70 degrees, even though I live in a part of the country that is fairly cold during the winter, but because I live in a newer building, I don't have to actually put in heaters for most of my tanks, because the temperature stays very, very warm in here even during the winter. So if you're wondering whether or not these particular cichlids in this tank need a heater, it really will depend on where you live and whether the housing you're in is up to code, and that it doesn't feel cold without the heat on. In general, I do keep the heat on, so it is over 70 pretty much all times of the day. But during the summertime, when it gets hot, it can be over 80 degrees. So I always try to watch the temperature to make sure. But I've learned that if you live in a newer construction, you can probably get away with not using a heater. Watch how your fish react to the drop in temperature. But as you can see, even in the middle of winter with no heater, they're fairly active, as you can see, and they're doing just fine. So if you like to hear more about my various tanks, definitely leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Also subscribe and like this video. That definitely helps me to promote my channel. And I'm hoping to get more viewers, just so I can then expand kind of all the different stuff I can talk about. But I'll definitely come back to this tank, because I didn't introduce you to all the various cichlids and fish that I have in this tank. But as you can see, it is a if you're living in this tank, you're not going to have a quiet day. So, but I'll talk more about it in the future. Thanks.